To you.
Great, thanks for the introduction. So as Tanis mentioned, I am the insurance broker, or our firm is the insurance provider for Open Farm Days. It's been, since inception, since you guys first started. So we've got a bit of an experience working with farms and agricultural societies in the province. So this program was introduced as a solution to farms that may or may not have the appropriate insurance for Open Farm Days and hosting events at their facilities. So it's a program that we've improved over the years, and we've seen some new additions to coverage in the last 12 months. So this is a little bit about me. I've been a broker for 15 years, been with NFP Foster Park for 14 years, so pretty familiar with what we do and what we offer. We're based in Edmonton. Do all types of commercial insurance, farm insurance, things like that. So these are some of the typical questions we get on Open Farm Days when it comes to how our policy works, and we try to address them in venues like this where we can sort of explain what coverage is included and what's not covered. And then as we get closer to the event, obviously we field those questions as they come in. So we can go through each of these one by one now, but for the most part, we try to cover off all aspects of this event outside of your regular farming operations. So this policy is just for the duration of Open Farm Days. It doesn't run year round. It's just for the weekend event in August, and we usually tack a day or two at the start and the end just to cover up any potential tail exposure. So yeah, these are things that we hear about quite frequently. Are the products offered by my farm covered by my farm liability? That the answer to that is yes. Your farm liability is designed to cover the products that your farm produces. However, there may be situations where your farm insurance provider is not okay with the event of Open Farm Days. We work with a lot of these farm insurers, and the results are mixed coming back from them. So we do see it from them that most of the time they are okay with the event. Other times they have a lot more questions. So to cover up any uncertainty, this policy sits in excess of your underlying farm policy. So either way, there should be coverage if there is ever an incident that comes from a product offered at the farm during Open Farm Days. Small startup businesses, typically not, no. So if there's a small startup business on the side, normally if it's a new venture, farm underwriters are going to ask you to carry separate commercial general liability if it's outside of farming. This is one where we had the answer changed. So for machinery riding at Open Farm Days, it's always been a challenge. Anything motorized, we've typically, unfortunately, needed to exclude. For 2024, we did have the positive feedback from a new carrier who allowed for wagon rides and even machinery demonstrations and rides on animals, wagons, sleighs. All of that has now been included for 2024, and we don't foresee any changes for 2025. So that's been a big improvement because there was a lot of requests for that in the last event. These are just a little bit of a structure difference in the types of insurance that we offer. So commercial general liability is sort of your year-round insurance, that if you have an ongoing business that is separate from your farm, you may want to explore getting a commercial general liability policy. Is there a question? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. But your screen is not moving forward with your presentation. We're still on the first one.
Oh, hang on a sec. Why do I have a different version? My apologies. I have two different screens going.
Okay.
So let me see if I can.
And we will be sharing this full presentation. So everyone here, you will get a copy of the full thing. So,
can we see that now?
Yeah, we are caught up to you now. Thank you.
Okay, I'm
Sorry
caught up to myself. Sorry about that. Got three monitors in front of me, so they show different things. So these are the two different types of policies that we can offer businesses. And during Open Farm Days, we treat you as a business. You're hosting third parties at your facility. So if you are running things year round, this is a transition that some farms will take as they delve into more commercial operations, whether it's we've seen it with a lot of the bee farms that will do this, or wineries, or even some of the more exotic type of farms where they'll host different kids activities. It's just a giant playground. Eventually you will outgrow your farm insurance, your farm liability, so you'll need to look at commercial general liability, which is the same policy that any small business carries. Event liability is for the short term. So those are short-term policies that we've always used for open farm days. It's very cost effective and flexible. We can really cater these policies to the duration of the event. And that has been the solution that we'll continue to use, because there's really no operations for open farm days outside of that weekend event. And I think I have to change it twice now. So are we looking at the correct slide? Okay. So this is a quick comparison. What's covered, what's not covered. I like this page probably the most because it answers everything pretty much in one shot. So who is covered? All farms and host facilities participating in the event. So we don't pick and choose. If you have the best farm policy in the world that will cover all aspects of it, this policy becomes an excess layer, so it sits on top of your underlying policy, and it includes coverage for food and beverage sales, including liquor. Bouncy castles are covered now. We do have some conditions for bouncy castles: tractor rides, wagon rides, petting zoos, animal demonstrations, you name it. This policy has been quite flexible. We do have a new insurance company we started with 2024, not new to us, just new to Open Farm Days. K&K Insurance has been insuring ag societies across the province for about 10 years now, and they're backed by Aviva Canada, which is one of the largest insurance companies in the country, and they just had a new approach this year. So we've got a new underwriter who took a new look at it, and now that we have enough years under our belt, they were able to basically give us credit for the 4 or 5 years we've had without a single claim. We have had a few incidents in the past. There has been some reported losses. Thankfully, there has been no claims made under these policies, which means the insurance company hasn't paid any dollars back out. So that means we are able to expand the coverage. And this isn't uncommon. As you know, even when you're driving a vehicle, that 16-year-old with no experience, they do tend to pay higher premiums. As you gain experience and have no accidents, the rates come down and the coverage can be expanded. So the only thing that we're not covering now, I mean, you're going to see, ever since COVID, they're always going to exclude any communicable disease, which would be COVID and BSC. So that's foot and mouth. With cattle, obviously, there's no insurance available for those exposures. Abuse and harassment are, again, always going to be excluded. Standard exclusions. The ones we want to pay attention to the most here are the ones at the bottom on the right. Any rough stock events, this is not coverage for rodeos. If we do have a farm that's looking at that, they can phone me separately. They can get their own rodeo insurance, but that's a new price point for any rough stock events. And then anything that is, this is more of a coverage, clarifying comment. Any injuries sustained by the farm employees or farm owners, the farmers themselves, there's no liability insurance for farm employees. That is what we call first party injuries, and farms can carry workers' comp. They certainly don't have to carry workers' comp, but you cannot sue yourself under a liability policy. Just how if you slipped and fell on your own driveway shoveling the snow this weekend, you can't file a claim under your own house insurance. That would be, disability insurance, short-term disability, or no coverage at all, right? There's really not a liability policy that's available for injuries sustained by the farm or property owner themselves. So mostly good news on that page. These are some comments and conditions of the underlying policy that the underwriters are requiring. They should Every farm should carry farm liability or commercial general liability for their own operations. It's not a requirement. If you don't have farm insurance, you're still eligible for this. This is introducing another layer of coverage. If you do have your own farm insurance, don't cancel it, is sort of the condition of the policy. Don't rely on this event policy to cover you throughout the year. This is specifically for open farm days. Anyone serving liquor needs to have ProServe. Just one person. There's a whole legislation on this through AGLC when you get your liquor license that we follow the standard AGLC legislation on that. There's nothing new that the insurance companies introduce. And all we need is your name. So you'll register with TANUS or someone else at ACE when we get closer to the summer. And that information is what we require for eligibility under the insurance program. And the last point is just for bounce inflatables. The bouncy castles, as fun as they are, everyone's kids loves them. My kids love them. There are some pretty hairy, ugly claims that come out of those. We have seen some serious injuries. We are willing to insure them, but they do have to follow some guidelines. So those guidelines are there for bounce inflatables. This is a bit of a Yeah, we're cruising through this. I've only used up 18 minutes, so we'll do a little Q&A. It's the same one from last year, but this is just a quick question. So see here. Okay. This is just an example. So we've got a visitor who falls ill after leaving the farm and requires hospitalization. They allege their condition is due to food poisoning after recently visiting a farm. So based on what we learned about insurance today, any guesses if that's covered or not? Big surprise here, not really. There is coverage for that. That's exactly what the policy is designed for, is what we would deem to be a bodily injury, which is just getting sick after eating food. The next one hasn't been updated. This slipped through the cracks because last year this was excluded, but this year the answer is changed. So if a rider falls off a tractor ride and becomes injured this year, the answer will be yes, there is coverage for this. So disregard that big red X, because for 2024 and 2025, there will be coverage for that. The next one, a horse spooks, kicks a guest, causing significant injuries. Again, bodily injury, which is what we're protecting the farms from. There is coverage for that. Let's see here, the next one. A guest puts out a cigarette in a planter which starts a fire, so that's property damage. The barn and home suffer significant fire damage, but no one's injured and no other property is damaged. So this is one that might, unless you're an insurance person, you might think there would be insurance coverage for under this event policy. There isn't again, we talked about first party coverage. So there won't be any coverage under the insurance for open farm days for this, because this is first party. So it says the barn and the home suffered fire damage. This would be the farmer's farm policy. So again, don't cancel your farm insurance. This is only for open farm days. Just want to drive that point home. That would be a very unfortunate situation where somebody thought that this policy could replace their farm insurance, which it's not intended to do. This one is sort of something that we have seen a few claims around, so I do want to bring it up as a claims example. Claims examples maybe resonate better. Stories tend to be remembered more than underwriter comments and wordings. So crowded parking areas, vehicles parked on the road, vehicle passing by is involved in a car accident, and you know, that car accident, you could expect to see an allegation for a lack of traffic control. And this is something that could very easily happen. And we've got pedestrians walking through ditches, crossing highways, range roads, townships that they're not typically expecting pedestrians to be, traversing. If something like this happens, it certainly could result in a lawsuit against the farmer as well as ACE. So we want to make sure that if something like that, if this happens, that there is coverage there, and that is exactly what this policy would protect you from. This is kind of an easy one. Neighboring farm decides to open their gates the day of the event, but they're not registered as a host farm. So I'm not a very good good teacher, I think this would be one of those freebie questions. Obviously, if you're not registered for the policy, you don't have any insurance under the policy. And this is one we're going to add this year for just reporting an incident. If something happens, there's often panic and uncertainty is what to do next. So Tanis has built a fantastic incident reporting form. It's a quick 2-pager that sort of just walks you through step by step on what to do if an accident happens. And it basically asks you 10 questions on what to do. One thing we want to keep in mind, if there ever is injuries, if somebody gets hurt at an event, make sure we're offering them emergency medical, even if it seems like a very silly thing to do. It is an important step in defending you in court potentially. Is were we able to either offer first aid or at least extend the opportunity for them to get first aid from an EMT or an EMR. So we just have to be able to make sure that whether it's a twisted ankle or, a paper cut, just say, do you need any first aid? Do you need to get a ride in an ambulance to a hospital? It seems like a silly thing to do, but we want to be able to stand in front of a judge at some point and say, yes, we offered them medical assistance. Yes, we offered them emergency medical. Yes, we offered them an ambulance. And that's really the standard of care that we're trying to achieve. That's sort of the reasonable person test that the courts will apply. We don't necessarily have to, bring the ambulance out to site. That's not what we're suggesting. It just needs to be an offer that's made to the injured party. And this isn't an admission of guilt. It's not like we are suggesting that we somehow caused the injury directly. But if there isn't, somebody falls down the stairs, somebody gets hurt, we have to be able to offer them that emergency medical assistance. And it seems kind of silly. Most people are going to apply the common sense rule, but it is something that if you've ever been hurt at an event or a hockey game or something like that, they usually take those things pretty seriously. So we should be doing the same. Everything needs to be recorded. We need to make sure that anything, if it does happen, it's not just, our memories or what we recall from the day. It needs to be documented. Everything needs to be either on that incident report or through a photo. And the reason for that is because injured parties will take a while to file that claim against the farmer. Typically, you're going to see claims filed within the 2-year statute of limitations. So if there's an injury that occurs August 15th, it might be August 15th, 2027 by the time that lawsuit actually hits, your front door. And they're banking on a lack of documentation to help their case. They are not going to be, the injured party is not concerned with your record keeping. So more important than anything, I would say, is keeping a record, keeping documentation, reporting that incident to Open Farm Days and to our office eventually. So notify the Open Farm Days coordinator of any incident that occurs, and either they will report that incident to me or it can be reported directly to our office. I believe the incident report form will include our contact information now, Tanis.
Yes.
And that's just a great way of doing that. We have had a handful of incidents over the years, usually relatively minor, but it's one of those things where we don't really get to pick what happens. So we just have to be there and ready to respond. In terms of what actually happens on the insurance side of things, let's say we have somebody fall off a tractor drawn wagon and gets a serious injury. Normally what would happen would be we file the claim with the insurance company. If there is, if it's something very major, like if it's a fatality, which we have seen, those claims are relatively straightforward because, we're not waiting for injuries to get worse. Most of the time, we don't do a lot unless we expect that there's some type of investigation that needs to be done. The insurance companies will basically take over all investigations from that point. When you buy an insurance policy, you're really buying a contract. You're transferring the risk of these events to the insurance companies. So they will ultimately decide how they respond, whether they investigate, whether they open a claim file. Oftentimes it just gets documented and we wait for the allegations to show up. We don't really know what they're going to allege we've done incorrectly until we see that statement of claim. But those incident reports are really the most crucial thing. And there's only 10 questions on there. It's not the hardest thing to go through. So if there is an incident, fill out that form and report it to our office as well as probably Tanis directly. So.
Great. So we'll open it up to some questions. I do have one off the top though. If somebody, I understand for insurance claims, existing property isn't covered in that case of a fire or natural disaster. For open farm days, a lot of the farms will rent temporary structures, so we'll see, see tenting and different types of things. Would those things be covered under the policy for open farm days?
Yeah, good question. No, they would not be covered because they are considered first party property. So anything that the farmer owns or is renting, borrowing, leasing, that's not third party property. It's not his property, but it's in his care and his custody and his control. So it's deemed to be his property. So he's responsible for insuring it directly. The open farm days insurance is for third party damage. So an example might be if there was a fire that started at an open farm days event and it spread to a neighboring property and
Okay.
maybe burned down the neighbor's farm, there is insurance for that. But anything that is used for open farm days, any physical assets, whether it's the house that they live in or a rented temporary structure, they would not be able to insure it under this because it's deemed to be first party property.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in past years, we have obviously we have farms that host their own events, but then we also have like multiple touch points where there will be a tour visiting farm to farm to farm. So those farms are not registered to be open the full day by themselves, but just for that limited time for that. What is the best way to handle those types of businesses?
Is there any way we could include them in the list of registered farms? This may be something we could take away
Yep.
offline, but I mean, really, we're not overly prescriptive. We just track the number of farms that are registered. So as long as they're on that list, whether or not they're actually taking place, if they're actually open for open farm days, we're not going to be overly, scientific in how we look at those ones. So.
Right. So, and if a farm wants to work with their neighbor, but the parking lot and that place of gathering will be their own farm, we would be able to register that second farm, not with a pinpoint on our map, but as a participant. But
Correct.
okay,
Yeah, we're not
perfect.
actually overly concerned with the physical location. You'll notice that I don't even know if we ask for the physical address of these farms. We're just looking for basically a mailing address because the physical locations are, we're going to have every quarter section in the province eventually named on this thing because we're spread out all over the place. So we're not restricted by the territory. It's more about who is covered rather than where is covered. So if we have a neighbor that says, hey, you know what, park on my back 40, I'm not using the space, no problem. Let's just stick that extra name on there because if there is an accident on his property, really we're trying to protect ourselves from an aggressive attorney, an aggressive lawyer who says, you know what, that neighbor, he maybe should have been in charge of crowd control. We're going to name that neighbor in the lawsuit, even though he was just opening up his gate to let people park there. He could be facing the wrong end of a lawsuit. So I would absolutely, for the cost of, I think we're down to 60 something dollars. There would be no reason not to include that neighbor in the list.
Right. And then under diseases, when we take a look at, no coverage, obviously COVID-19, and you specified BSE, what about things like avian bird flu, swine flu, things like that?
Yeah, oh, those are covered absolutely, or they're included in that list, so there's no coverage for any communicable disease. I can send you the actual wording if you'd like to see it, but yeah, bovine, spongiform,
All of these.
encephalopathy, and avian flu and COVID are anything that is deemed to be a communicable disease, we have no insurance for, and that's really not something that we can change. That's
Yep.
basically federally mandated. All the insurance companies, we used to have they call it CDE, communicable disease exclusion. It used to be 4 or 5 lines on a wording. We're up to 4 or 5 pages now since COVID. Everybody's definitely made those exclusions a lot more robust. There are some policies out there that are introducing COVID coverage for business interruption. That's very niche and certainly not within the budget for Open Farm Days.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're okay with it, I think I might just update your slide when we send it out to include kind of avian bird flu and a few of the others. Just when they see it excluded, they might make the assumption that it is covered. So I think it's probably good just to outline that.
I can absolutely put more exclusions in there if you want to see them all. We can.
Well, just some of the big ones would be great,
Yeah,
and almost for a full list, like contact us kind of thing.
yeah.
Just so
I'd
people
be
are
happy to. I can update it for you if you'd like, and I can put in
perfect.
the full list of communicable diseases if you'd like.
It just really a couple more of the major farm ones that were like the avian bird flu, swine flu. Like I think those
Yeah.
ones would be good. And I'll open it up to our attendees here and to Cameo and Suzanne as well. If you've got any other questions.
I have a question here. I just more clarification. So we can add our neighbor because that's one thing we're already looking at is we're very confined for parking.
Yep.
And we have had conversations with the neighbor and he is okay parking. So you're saying that like when we fill this out, we can just add his name as well, or he has to apply and get his farm approved as well? I was a little confused there.
Hi, Brent. I'll jump in with that one. For that kind of situation, you'll want to email Suzanne directly. And because what we do is we'll have our master spreadsheet of everybody registered. If they go on and register, then that'll automatically trigger their pin drop. So anyone that is looking to provide coverage for a neighbor that are not participating, as in we're not going to be exploring their farms, we'll have to make like a special exception for that. So for that kind of scenario, you would just email Suzanne directly.
Okay, and then another because we're actually going to be a feature farm, so they're actually serving a meal at our place, and they're bringing greyhounds, buses, and all that type of stuff. And I believe they're setting up a food truck. So, like the food truck, I'm assuming would have their own insurance, but is me being that since they're serving, is there kind of coverage? Because I do see like food and beverage is covered, but like, do I need to
Absolutely.
get them included as well?
No, those are great questions, Brent. That sounds like a good spot to be. So absolutely, we have no limitation on the type of food you're serving or what kind of drinks you're serving. As long as you're compliant with the host liquor legislation from Alberta Gaming and Liquor, AGLC, you're on board with us. So we have full coverage for your event. The food truck is a third party, so you're right, he will need to have his own insurance. Just how, again, we're talking about not what is covered, but also like who is covered. Your farm is insured. So if there is an incident from that food truck where he serve somebody bad food or maybe run somebody over, heaven forbid, you could expect your farm to be named in that lawsuit and we would defend you in that lawsuit. We're not going to protect the food truck guy. He needs his own insurance for that.
And Brent, further to that, anyone that has and operates a food truck will have Alberta Health Services. They have a certificate that is renewed annually. So they will have up-to-date AHS and insurance coverage, much like people that do bouncy castles and things like that. They have their own internal insurance policies as part of it, so that it's not a new risk to them. It's a business risk that they would already have insurance for.
Okay, no, that it sounds good. Yeah, it's kind of getting really big on us, and we just and we're new, so it's just trying to cover our own butts. So
Yeah. Brent, whereabouts are you and who are you working with that's building this?
we're just outside Red Deer,
Oh, okay.
just by Canyon Ski Hill, and it's
Perfect.
Red Deer County has chosen us as a feature farm for Central Alberta. So they're bringing, I don't know, 2, 3 greyhounds, and
Yeah.
one of our clients that we do, they're going to be catering a meal, and there's possibility of like a live band. I don't know. It's getting, every time we talk, it's getting bigger.
Yeah, well, Melanie and her group did that last year as well, and it's a great event, and they're following all the rules, and yeah, they're good partners to work with. So you're in good hands.
Thank you.
My hometown, Brent, Red Deer. So it's yeah, Canyon Ski Hill this time of year. It brings back fond memories. So the insurance company we're with has we're partnered with a company that's sort of prepared for growth. They've looked at the history of the event and are excited to be a partner. So there's not too much that we can throw at them that they're not going to be you know, scared away by. So that's great to hear that you're planning for a big one.
Yeah, and last year's event was great. They did a great job. Yeah, wonderful. Any other questions? And otherwise, we can wrap it up.
I was just going to throw something in there. So I know everybody gets quite excited if they don't get their insurance certificate well in advance. We typically don't communicate the information to NFP until sort of that last week, once we're sure that all the farms that are registered are participating and haven't canceled. So you won't see that insurance certificate come from Open Farm Days until probably 2 or 3 days before the event. So you don't need to panic that you're not going to get it. It's one of those last step things that we do just before the event.
Yeah.
And I should mention just quickly, we do have some more flexibility because there always seems to be last minute additions, last minute deletions, and that's sort of become the standard. So this is maybe more for tennis. If we do have that, we do what's called an adjustment. So if you tell me there's going to be 150 farms, and then at the end of the event, so the week following the event, if you say we actually had 160 or we had 140, we can just do a quick adjustment to that. So we don't want to, once the policies get issued, it's very challenging to change them because it's summer and there's events happening all over the province. It's just more of an invoicing and accounting exercise that happens in the following week. So we can run it right up until the final date before the event. Once the event has started, there's really nothing we can change at that point. But right up until that policy becomes effective, we can add or delete names as you need.
Wonderful. Well, and thank you for your help for, getting equine activities added and bouncy castles and kind of rolling with our program and our needs as they change and grow as well. So it's a great partnership, and we certainly appreciate it and appreciate your time here today. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Happy to be part of it.
All right. All right. And if anyone has any questions, of course, feel free to email us directly and we can get the answers to you. And following this, we will send out our incident report and an updated presentation from Perry with a couple of those exclusions, and we'll take things from there. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next month.